This is Robert Greenwald. I'm the president of Brave New Films. The nonprofit has produced the film and that is making it available for free all across the country. Thank all of you for joining this Zoom premiere. At a time when the racist-driven attacks on the right to vote are escalating, when the COVID crisis is being used by some to stop others from voting, and when the census itself is being manipulated, the importance of the fight to vote against voter suppression has never been greater. We are very pleased today to be streaming the film here and with Indivisible and Stand Up America, Move On, Democracy for America, Brady, Black Voters Matter, Greenpeace, and now this. So people will be seeing this film and the discussion today in many ways all over the country, because it truly does take a village. And now here is the trailer for the film.
Breaking down a key part of the Voting Rights Act.
It let the dogs out. It let racially discriminatory voting laws to just run wild.
We are witnessing a tidal wave of voter suppression around the country.
Alabama,
Arkansas,
North Carolina,
and Georgia, which is becoming ground zero.
Georgia's tight race for governor is getting national attention.
Brian Kemp is not only the Republican gubernatorial nominee, he's Georgia's Secretary of State.
Stacey Abrams looking to make history by becoming the nation's first female African-American governor.
The Democrats are working hard, registering all these minority voters.
Civil rights leaders say Kemp is illegally removing people from Georgia's voters list.
The purges, they've been going on for over a century in this state.
My girl wanted to vote, and they were trying to keep her from voting.
The lines was crazy everywhere.
I tried contacting the Georgia Elections Board. My vote will not be counted.
I'm 65, and for the first time, I did not get a chance to vote.
We are not going to let them take from us what our grandparents and parents fought to give us in the first place.
The coronavirus pandemic is creating concerns ahead of the 2020 election.
I think that mail-in voting is a terrible thing.
We are here to resist an ID law that is undemocratic, unconstitutional, and immoral.
On my mother's dying bed at 92 years old, former sharecropper, her last words were, "Do not let them take our votes away from us."
Against suppression. It's taking place in many ways, by many people, by many groups, by many of you on this premiere today. And I'm particularly pleased today to have with us some of the elected champions who are fighting hard and long to protect our right to vote in the battle to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Amendment Act, a critical piece of legislation. Thank all of you, and we will start with Representative Sewell.
Hi, I'm Congresswoman Terri Sewell of Alabama's 7th Congressional District. And today it is my pleasure to join with other colleagues of mine to introduce the Suppress of 2020, The Fight to Vote, a powerful documentary examining our country's shameful practice of voter suppression. As evidence in the Georgia election of 2018 midterms. As a proud daughter of Selma, Alabama, and the representative of Alabama's Civil Rights District, the legacy of voting rights runs deep in my blood. I believe that there is no truer cause more important to our democracy than the access to the ballot box by all Americans. Sadly, this nation mourns the passing of our colleague, my hero, Congressman John Robert Lewis, a hero in the civil rights and voting rights movement and a staunch, longtime advocate for voting rights. As a little girl growing up in Selma, the stories of John Lewis's bravery was as much a part of my upbringing as any Bible verse or family lore. As an adult, I know that my very existence as Alabama's first Black Congresswoman was only made possible because of the sacrifice of John Lewis and those foot soldiers. As John would say, he shed a little blood on that bridge in my hometown for the right of every American to vote. John's courage and mentorship gave me and so many of us the right to walk the halls of Congress and of state houses across this country. I think it's apt that H.R. 4, the Voting Rights Advancement Act, was renamed the John Robert Lewis Voting Rights Act of 1965. And it's been my honor to be the lead House sponsor since the 2013 Shelby versus Holder decision, which gutted the Voting Rights Act. I am honored every day to carry that piece of legislation. And because you went to the polls in 2018 and ushered in a Democratic House majority, we finally passed H.R. 4 out of the House, and it sits on the desk of Mitch McConnell, languishing on the Senate. And I know that you will hear from my Senate advocates who have proudly supported H.R. 4 and its passage. We know that we have a tremendous loss with John Lewis, but we also know that there are actors afoot trying to make sure that voter suppression is the rule of the day and not that we have access to the ballot box. I think that this film highlights that in glaring detail. You know, as I feel sad about the loss of John Lewis, I know that he sowed many seeds in so many people, the seeds of hope and inspiration. We can hear his voice, never give up, never give in. The vote is the most important non-violent tool in our democracy. Let's make sure we preserve it. I'm doing that every day on the Hill, and I am honored to be doing that with Senator Leahy. Senator Leahy of Vermont is a lead sponsor of H.R. 4 on the Senate side, has been an advocate supporter of voting rights his whole career. And I now introduce Senator Patrick Leahy.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman. And I would so appreciate times we could be together and talking about this. And both you and I will remember standing there with our dear friend John Lewis saying, we want this. So the timing of this documentary could not be better. Actually, it couldn't be more urgent. Our dear friend and hero, think of what John said. He called the right to vote, and I quote, the most powerful nonviolent tool we have to create a more perfect union. Just think of that. We're looking at our watch. Americans' fundamental right to vote faces unprecedented threats. Voter suppression schemes are colliding with the COVID-19 pandemic, and that could potentially disenfranchise countless Americans ahead of the November election. John Lewis's thundering words just months ago echo even more loudly today. He said, when you see something that's not right, you have a moral obligation to do something. Our children and their children will ask us, what did you do? Well, I hope this film serves as a call to action for all of us. Every single one of us have to stand up in defense of our precious right to vote. John fearlessly did that all his life and almost gave his life on the bridge doing that. So last month here in the Senate, I introduced the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. I very rarely get emotional on this Senate floor, but I got choked up talking about our friend John as I did that. And I'm thankful that 48 Senate co-sponsors are on there. They would restore the landmark Voting Rights Act, whose 55th anniversary is tomorrow, and help stop the scourge of voter suppression. The House passed their legislation, as the Congresswoman knows, is a leader in that, in December. Now the Senate must do its part, and Mitch McConnell's Republican leader has got to stop stalling. Bring it up. Have the courage. Vote for it or vote against it. Don't just hide it and pretend you're thinking of it, but being afraid to vote. I'm not afraid to vote. I know how I'll vote. But Americans also have to demand more. The COVID-19 pandemic threatens our ability to safely cast our ballots. And despite the president embracing bogus conspiracy theories and fact-free Twitter rants in the middle of the night. A number of states have successfully and securely used mail-in ballots for years. My state of Vermont has. But we need urgently federal help to expand mail-in voting operations. Time of COVID, that's going to be critical for American safety, but also for their votes so that every single vote can count. Now, the House has passed significant funds to help states prepare for November. Senate Republicans, you know how much money they had in their package for state election assistance? Not 1 cent. That's appalling. It's unacceptable. Americans have to urge Congress to assist our states so we're not forced to risk our health simply to exercise a right that all Americans have. So I think the film plays an important role. It's going to educate Americans about what we have here, what's at stake. Suppress 2020 will inspire Americans to keep fighting for a change. I hope everybody looks at it. I want everybody, Republicans and Democrats, to look at it, because this is not a Republican or Democratic issue. This is an American issue. It's an American birthright. Indeed, the right to vote is what gives democracy its name. I was proud when John Lewis called me his brother. But I think of him when I think of how we have to protect this right vigilantly. John did this every single day with every fiber of his body. He's passed the baton to us. Now it's our turn to keep on marching. And I'm so happy to see my friend, Senator Cory Booker. He's a strong and respected voice. He's one of the very few people in all my years here, when he stands up to speak in our caucus, people shut up and actually listen to him because it's worthwhile. So Cory, my dear friend, it's all yours.
Thank you very much. It's so good to be here. I have to say that Senator Leahy is not only one of the more esteemed and respected senators right now in the Senate, but if you look at his career, he will undoubtedly go down as one of the great, most accomplished senators in the Senate history. And it's great to be on with him right now. And Terri Sewell, who is my friend, partner, sister on the other side of the Capitol, it's great to have her here as well. And I just want to start by saying, thank you to the makers of this film. I love documentary film, and whether it's from issues of our environment all the way to understandings how plastics are destroying our oceans, documentary film is one of the incredible ignition points right now for so much activism. And this film, to me, is at the crux, at the center of so many other issues going on in our democracy. Because whatever issue is important to you, the roots will always be in us being a representative democracy where everyone has a voice, and your vote is your voice. We have come this far, whether it's the 15th Amendment, whether it's the 19th Amendment, by activism and struggle. We know from the 1870 15th Amendment, we know from the suffrage movement and the 1920 Amendment that these came about because of the activism of others. As Frederick Douglass, that abolitionist himself, said, if there's no struggle, there is no progress. And we stand on the shoulders of activists who secured for us rights that we cannot take for granted. We are here because of that Voting Rights Act that was struggled for, fought for, that people died. Remember, Goodman, Cheney, and Schwerner died in Mississippi, registering people to vote. And that fateful legacy of Bloody Sunday, where incredible marchers, including John Lewis, were beaten savagely. All of that effort helped to get us a voting rights law. But I fear for my generation and all of us now in this current moment in history, because we've seen through the Shelby decision the gutting of the Voting Rights Act. We've seen states from Texas to North Carolina move quickly before the ink was even dry on that decision to pass restrictive laws undermining people's ability to get to the polls. In fact, a judge in North Carolina, a federal judge, said that the North Carolina legislature wrote that bill that restricted the vote with surgical-like precision to undermine the ability for African Americans to vote. And so you're going to see through this film that we are in a distraught present. And it's not getting better in many ways, it's getting worse. We see, as we are sitting here in the recent days, our president really attacking vote by mail and trying to delegitimize it, and literally taking states like Nevada to court, trying to stop them from making it easier for people to vote safely from home during a pandemic. He is preemptively trying to question the legitimacy of a November outcome. He is taking on the Postal Service and doing things to try to slow their functioning of the Postal Service, which is vital to conducting vote by mail. And we see this over and over again as we face challenges. And so we have action to do now to not lose ground that was gained by sweat and struggle and blood and even death. History will judge our generation by what we do in the face of not just trying to hold the ground on the rights that our parents and grandparents' generation gained for us, but what we do to advance that ground, what we do to make voting more robust, to do things that are common sense, like what about voting being a national holiday? What about automatic voter registration? And more that can make voting in this country vibrant and dynamic. And that's not a partisan issue, that's a patriotic issue. Every generation, as I've said, from the amendments to our Constitution to the activism of my parents' generation, has worked to expand the franchise in this country and secure it. And we cannot stop now. And so I leave you with this. I'm here because of voting rights activists. I love that obviously you have 2 senators and an amazing Congresswoman, but change does not come from Washington, it comes to Washington by people standing up and accepting the responsibility that this is my country. I will not surrender to cynicism. I will not just say the system is rigged and sit back and do nothing. Then you are complicit in the problems. This documentary is powerful. But its true test will be whether it helps to ignite you to do more than you're doing now. Because if you do the same thing you've been doing now, well, we've been losing ground. You can't expect different results. This is one of those moral moments in history. If you truly, truly honor those who struggled for the rights you take for granted, well, every generation has to prove worthy of the rights they inherited by advancing them. I want to thank the filmmakers one more time. I want to thank my colleagues for being on this, but I want to thank you, the viewer of this film, because truly you have the destiny of our country in your hands. As the great James Baldwin said at the end of The Fire Next Time, everything now we must assume is in our hands. We have no right to assume otherwise. Thank you very much. I appreciate you, honor you all. Let's continue the work. Let's continue the struggle. Let's make our ancestors in heaven looking down upon us, including John Lewis, proud that we have done that good work, caused that good trouble, gotten the way, made the sacrifice to ensure that generations yet to come benefit in the bounty and blessings of this democracy. Thank you.
How will I be able to vote without putting my life in danger?
The Black Lives Matter actions make voting more important than ever.
Will this health crisis become a constitutional crisis?
Am I going to be able to vote in November?
We have a historic decision today, striking down a key part of the Voting Rights Act, a civil rights law passed back in 1965.
The Supreme Court essentially said racism is over, and these communities don't need to pre-clear these changes anymore.
This decision leaves virtually unprotected minority voters in communities all over this country. It let the dogs out. It let these racially discriminatory voting laws to just run wild.
Within hours of the Voting Rights Act being gutted, Texas had a new strict photo ID law.
And within days, Alabama announced its own repressive voter ID law.
We are witnessing a tidal wave of voter suppression around the country.
200,000 more people would have voted in Wisconsin if not for their strict voter ID law.
Voter purges have become rampant. Since the 2016 election, states have removed almost 17 million voters nationwide.
You describe Georgia as the epicenter of the current voter suppression battle. What has earned Georgia that distinction?
Georgia's tight race for governor is getting national attention.
Brian Kemp is not only the Republican gubernatorial nominee, he's Georgia's Secretary of State.
Stacey Abrams looking to make history by becoming the nation's first female African-American governor.
Volunteers are picking up phones and knocking on doors across the state.
Come in and register to vote.
We are very excited to register as many people as we possibly can.
What do we want?
Register to vote!
When do we want it?
Today!
I come as one, but I stand as 10,000.
Pull back that veneer. And you see something really rotten happening. It's almost like termites coming in. They're in the wood, they're eating the wood away, and you don't even realize your house is getting ready to collapse until it's almost too late. We've got to understand, this isn't a Klan cross burning. This stuff is very bureaucratic, it's very mundane, it's very routine, but it is lethal.
My name is Bobby Jenkins. I live in Cuthbert, Georgia. The county is Randolph County. I spent about almost 35 years in education. I'm a superintendent of schools.
My name is Loretta Brown. I live in Morgan, Georgia, and I grew up in Randolph County. I am the state advisor for the Georgia NAACP Youth and College Division.
My name is Lewis Brooks. I live in Thomaston, Georgia, Upson County, and I've been living here my whole 89 years, except the 2 years I spent in service in Korea. In I believe it was 55 or 56, that's when they started to letting black people vote in Upson County. When I went to register to vote, it was tough. They asked me all kind of questions to try to keep me from registering. I passed the test. Once I got my voter right, I decided I wasn't going to let anything stop me from voting. Because I used to walk. You go up the street here, across the next street over there, I walk over there and walk back and vote. And I didn't miss a voting, except when they closed the poll. I'm a citizen. It's my right to vote and speak my opinion.
I saw this ad saying that there was a proposal to close 7 of the 9 precincts in Randolph County. I said, what?
Then they put it in the papers that they was closing polls, costing them too much money.
First of all, Randolph is a poor county. Just to give you an example of what it would mean, there's a community benevolence a little north of town. Had that precinct been closed, some of those individuals would have to go 30 miles round trip in order to vote. It would have been a terrible hardship on our poor, on our elderly, and on those who are least able to afford transportation.
I got disabled and I couldn't do no driving. I know I couldn't afford to go that far to vote. This was in a black neighborhood. It made me feel like they would close it down to keep the black people from voting, because most black people vote Democrat. They only closed one white voting place. Everybody from out here in the black side go clean over there to the white section to vote. We're human, and we have our rights to vote just like anybody else.
Voters in Randolph County, Georgia are outraged.
Randolph County residents expressed their concerns with the Board of Elections.
Our citizens turned out in full force.
Big problem now.
They were behind us 100%, trying to keep those polling places open.
Convenience of the voter. You all are not considering that at all.
There's no disenfranchisement for the African Americans.
I went to the meeting, find out that they were trying to close 7 of the precincts.
You've got to stand up. You cannot allow this to continue.
They gave a couple of reasons, saying it would save money. The other one was that several of the polling places were not ADA compliant. The thing that was so ironic is we voted that way in May. You know, they weren't any worse in November than they were in May.
It will be impossible for rural voters without vehicles to vote on Election Day. It will be impossible for them. They will have to walk 3.5 hours just to get from one of these polling places to Cuthbert and Shellman.
We did petition to keep it open. Pressure from the residents, civil rights organization, speaking up, speaking out.
They called the meeting to order, and they only had one motion. They voted to keep them open.
The news of what was happening here in Randolph County went worldwide.
The incident that we experienced threw the spotlight on everything else that had been going on. You know, we find out that in the state of Georgia, there were over 200 other polling places had been closed.
If you move a poll 4 miles, it is the equivalent of a 20% drop in black voter turnout. That's what shutting down these polls mean.
With 2 months to go, the race is heating up in Georgia.
Stacey Abrams' campaign feel they have the momentum behind them, and many of the polls we've seen so far support that.
You know, the Democrats are working hard, registering all these minority voters. If they can do that, they can win these elections in November.
There's no law in Georgia that requires the Secretary of State to process voter registration forms on a particular timeline.
Kemp withheld putting the names of thousands on the voter registration list until after the election.
80% were African Americans, Latinos, and Asian Americans.
This is Fulton County. Linda Marshall is my name. Most of my professional career has been in public service of one kind or another, as a teacher, as a government worker. I moved here in August of this year, but because of my emphasis on always being registered and always having the ability to vote, I did that almost immediately when I got here. Of course, I also knew the importance of the upcoming election, and I wanted to be a part of that history. It got closer and closer and closer to the election, and I was getting a little bit concerned, so I called the Secretary of State's office. My name is not on the roll. They can't tell me where it is. So all of that paperwork that I sent in, I don't know where it is. I'm 65, and for the first time, I did not get a chance to vote in a very close election of historic importance and proportion. Welcome to Georgia.
The midterm election in Georgia is only 29 days away.
Civil rights leaders say Kemp is illegally removing people from Georgia's voters list.
Republican Brian Kemp has already gotten the backing of our current president.
Thousands of purged from Georgia's voting rolls.
Purged from Georgia's voting rolls. 890,000. They had no idea they could vote.
Other states use the same brewing over who's been removed from the voter roll.
There has been instance after instance of unlawful voter purging. States are removing voters, many of whom have actually been found to have been eligible but were unlawfully removed from the rolls.
I received the purge notice. So I open it up and I read the first sentence. I, along with 380,000 Georgians, received the same notice.
That's an especially pernicious way to prevent people from voting, because once you register to vote, you would think that you should be able to remain on the rolls. And once you're removed from the rolls, you cannot vote.
I went out and got the mail, and there were 2 letters in there. They looked official. You're hereby notified that the City of Thunderbolt has challenged your right to vote. The City of Thunderbolt states that you no longer reside within the municipality. My license is valid, my address is valid, I own this home. Why are you questioning my right to vote?
You know, the purges, they've been going on for decades, maybe over a century in this state.
If you haven't voted in the last few elections, they'll purge you as if you must not be in the state anymore. If you move within the same county, they'll purge you, assuming you're not living in Georgia anymore. If you don't return a postcard from the Secretary of State, they'll purge you, because to them it means you're not a resident at this address. All of these tactics specifically and disproportionately target people of color, poor people, the elderly, all of whom tend to vote for Democrats.
Brian Kemp is notorious for erasing the polls and purging people right before the election deadline.
You have a candidate at the top of the ticket who is responsible for maintaining the integrity of the election.
He needed to have his hands on the levers.
You have an umpire who is also playing in the game.
Less than 20 days away from the midterms now.
The race for Georgia's governorship is a toss-up.
Literally is a dead heat.
This governor's race is already one for the history books, but it's also seeing record numbers of requests for absentee ballots, especially from African-American voters.
At a time where we're seeing roughly almost half of the people who've turned in an absentee ballot are people of color, that's a really, really good sign for Stacey Abrams.
We caught them off guard by running such a large-scale program and mailed 1.6 million African Americans an absentee ballot application.
In this midterm election, the absentee ballot requests are even outperforming presidential years. So that is startling and eye-popping and something that we need to dig in on to see what's going on there.
My name is Norman Broderick, and I'm in Powder Springs, Georgia, Cobb County. I've did 24 years in the military, deployed to Iraq twice, Bosnia, Saudi Arabia. I voted absentee before when I was deployed. When I was in Iraq the first time, I voted absentee, and when I was in Iraq the second time, I voted absentee. The absentee ballot is a very important tool that exists to allow people, not only just the military, but anybody who happens to be away from their voting station, to be able to cast their vote.
My name is Peggy Shu. I'm from Johns Creek, Georgia.
I left Georgia for DC in the beginning of October, and before I left, I mailed out my absentee ballot application so that our registrar would send an absentee ballot to my new DC address.
I work at a U.S. Army Central, which is located at Shaw Air Force Base in Sumter, South Carolina. I'm away from home during the week. I knew I wasn't going to be able to get back to Georgia to vote. I could only do this absentee. I filled out everything I was supposed to fill out. I sent their documents in. I got confirmation that it was received. And to my surprise, I did not receive my absentee ballot.
I checked my mailbox every day. It was like nearing the end of the month. And so I started calling the voter protection hotline. I called my registrar. I sent emails, and it was really getting close to the election date. And I never received my ballot. The election day came and went, and I wasn't able to vote in the end.
When I contacted my wife and asked her about it, I think it was a couple of days before the election, it came here. And I tried contacting the Georgia Elections Board. I was told they did receive my absentee ballot request. Everything was filled out correctly, but that they mailed it to the wrong address. And she admitted that yes, they did mess up, it was their fault. But there was nothing I could do about it. It's too late, it's over with, and my vote will not be counted during this election.
It was probably one of the most frustrating things I've ever experienced. After having spent, my entire college career very invested in the political process, it was, I don't know, like a punch to the gut.
It still pisses me off to this day. Being in Baghdad, voting absentee was easier than being 4 hours away trying to vote absentee in South Carolina.
I took to Facebook, and like the millennial activist that I am, I recounted my experience in a Facebook post. I wrote, "This is what happened. I wasn't able to vote, and if you had a similar experience, let me know." And my friend from high school, she reached out to me and she said, "I also had struggles trying to get my ballot in, voting absentee."
So I submitted an absentee ballot. It came 2 days right before Election Day.
Over the course of 48 hours, we had 40 people. So many people in our immediate Facebook circle knew somebody who had a similar experience to us.
People have requested it like far in advance. Some people just didn't get their vote in.
That was when we really realized that this was not an isolated incident. It was a much bigger issue and a much more deeper rooted sort of phenomenon that was going on statewide.
I did speak with the Board of Elections, and he just dismissed it as like a hiccup. And he's like, "Oh, like, no, you don't really know what you're talking about." 40 cases, not really a hiccup. It's more of like a wake-up call.
Today, we've worked to get answers about the claim that thousands of voters never got the absentee ballots they requested.
The race between Abrams and Kemp is literally neck and neck.
Their fate is now in the hands of voters.
The day is finally upon us.
The midterm elections are happening.
Voters head to the polls in one of the most intensely fought midterm elections.
The race for Georgia's governorship is a toss-up.
I live in the South. I'm always worried about Election Day.
Have a great morning and go vote.
Oh yeah, gotta go vote today.
Voting started here in Georgia this morning, and if you think hitting the polls early will keep you from getting stuck on long lines, think again.
Voter Protection Hotline, how can I help you?
Voter Protection Hotline, how can I help you?
I've never seen one.
The line hasn't moved in over an hour. The line is running.
I really thought I was going to be able to run in and run out like I usually do.
The first thing I saw was just people everywhere. So we stood there for a while without moving. And then we would inch up. And then we wouldn't move. We had a lot of people with children there, pregnant mothers, elderly people. Some people have medical issues.
I took my son to school that morning, and then I went to vote at Ferguson Elementary, where I vote every election. The line just keeps getting longer. The line was so long, through the school and wrapped around the building. The lines was crazy everywhere, all over the county. It was real long. I was in line for 2 hours. I got to the door, that's when they was checking your ID before you go in, and she couldn't find my name. She directed me to go downtown Gwinnett, and I was like, I'm not gonna vote. And it was this older lady, she came over and she like held my hand and was like, please go do it. We need this. And I looked in her eyes and said, I will.
Register somewhere else when they pulled it up in the system. Don't take my ID.
About 8 or 9, we started getting the calls about the long lines.
Long lines at the polling stations lead to low voter turnout. The research is just crystal clear on that.
Everyone in the world knew we were going to vote today. And in my neighborhood, there are no power cords. All these dedicated people waiting to vote. This is what we call voter suppression.
People were like upset and angry. I started calling the Secretary of State's office. I was either hung up on, placed on hold. They want people to go home and not vote. I ain't going nowhere. I'm gonna be right here.
The reason they sent me from Ferguson to the downtown Gwinnett was for the provisional vote. So I drove 25 minutes, and then when I got there, it was crowded in there. I waited 45 minutes to find out that's not where I needed to be. She told me that this was the wrong place and that I can go back to Ferguson. I had to call back and redo my schedule. So now, the voting not only cut on my time, cut on my money.
When we went in, filled out all the paperwork, had the ID, took it up to the lady. I had mine in my hand. One hand had hers in the other, because she's legally blind. So we go give it to the lady, and she goes to scan Barbara's ID. Wow. So she looked up at Barbara. She said, well, Miss Barbara, when was the last time you voted? My sister got strong. I've been voting since I was 18 years old, and I'm 82.
Yeah, I was disappointed.
She was a little upset. My girl wanted to vote, and they were trying to keep her from voting.
Since I became a citizen, I have not missed an election. I showed up, and a very nice lady, she looked at my ID and said, no, you're not registered. And I said, no, wait a second. Here's my registration card, and showed them that I was registered. And they said, yeah, but your name is Del Rio with a space, but your voter ID says Del Rio one word, and therefore it doesn't match. In the voter registration, my name shows as Del Rio with a space. My ID is Del Rio, no space. That was a non-match. I said, this is not legal and I need to be allowed to vote. After much discussion, they said to me, this time we'll allow you to vote, but it's a little bit like they're doing me a favor. The right to vote should be something that we should make easier rather than more difficult.
Latinos and Asian Americans are 6 times more likely than white Georgians to be cut from the voter rolls because of exact match, and Black Americans are 8 times more likely to be cut because of exact match.
I have voted in every election, now all of a sudden I'm not there.
Controversy surrounds the state's exact match law that put the registrations of 53,000 voters, most of them African Americans, on hold because of discrepancies in the way their names are spelled in state databases.
People of color have names that are a little bit less typical, and that's where the errors are at their highest. Brian Kemp knows this.
A group of students will not have their voices heard at the polls, at least not in Georgia.
They're turning a bunch of students away over here.
We're showing up here and at the Booker T. Washington location, and their names were not on the actual roll.
The students was being turned away. I talked to over 50 students that morning.
First, they told me I was at the wrong polling station.
They said, you didn't get registered. I was like, what do you mean?
And there was only about 4 voting ballot booths.
They didn't process my registration didn't go through. I walked back to my dorm and said, I guess I just won't vote.
Just before I went to vote, I had been in an African American history class where we were actually talking about voter suppression, about what was it like for people that were going to vote. I filled out a little slip of paper, gave it to the poll workers. They looked up at me and they said, it's coming up in our system as though you're not a citizen of the United States. I just sort of looked at them like they had 2 heads. I'm sorry, I was born in New York. What?
When I got to the front of the line, they informed me that I was registered to vote, but not in Dougherty County. They were telling me that I was registered back home in Winter Robins, where I was from, and I've never voted there. I've never even been registered there.
The thing was that I had brought proof that I was a U.S. citizen. I had with me my driver's license, my passport card, and my Emory student ID, but they would not look at the passport card whatsoever to prove that I was a citizen. I walked out crying. What I learned in history class just hours before, this happened to me in 2018.
I had been through and participated in its voter registration drive on campus, within the community. It was just like, wow, after all of this, I'm not gonna be able to vote myself.
Like when I was growing up, voting was a thing. It was an event. So little me is trailing behind my parents watching them vote.
My parents would take me to the voting polls every time when I was little. I would go in and I would help them fill out the bubbles.
I get a chance to vote, and then you get there and the experience is just terrible, and you have to call your mom and be like, why is this so hard? You never told me it would be this hard.
This was huge for us because Stacey Abrams was actually a Spelman alum. History would have been made, and it would have been made by my Spelman sister.
If there is no one who gets to 50% tonight, Robin, there will be a runoff in December.
We'll find out as the day and evening goes on.
Voter Protection Hotline, how can I help you?
Are they letting you know? No? Are you really kidding me?
Old people who can't vote, there's young people who can't vote, there's people in every county who can't vote. It just created this intense fog of confusion across the state.
Been here for 3 hours, 4 or 5 hour wait.
5 hours.
This is way, way too long for us to stay and vote.
How long have you waited in line here?
About 3.5 hours.
And have you decided you can't stand it? You can't take it anymore? Are you going to go home? Come back?
I'm hurting. I'll be back. I got to go take some medicine.
It was really good. The lines weren't too long and everyone was super helpful.
We don't hardly ever have to wait here. It's always a pleasant experience up here.
If you have a fixed resource, an easy way to suppress the vote is to just make that resource unavailable to the people who you don't want to vote. And that's exactly what happened in the 2018 election here in the state of Georgia. In places like North Fulton County, which are wealthy, there were more machines than anyone could ever use. In black neighborhoods, there were a quarter of the number of machines that were needed to service the population.
Lots of people left without voting.
It was people just dropping off when it became 2 hours, 3 hours. 4th hour is very heartbreaking.
All it takes is a little walking away at 159 counties to influence an election. A little here, a little there, and then in a race like this, which was so close, there you go.
All night on Twitter, a trending topic, hashtag stay in line.
I had to go and pick my son up. He had to be picked up before 6. I picked my son up and he went with me and sat in the car. And then I went back to Ferguson Elementary. And by this time, the evening crowd is there and the line has tripled. And I was like, oh, there is no way. Just for my one vote, it took me like 6 hours. And I wanted to give up because I promised that elderly lady outside that I would do it.
5 hours, so about 5 hours took me to vote. It sucks the life out of you.
I'd been in people's homes, I'd been in their neighborhoods, I'd held their hands. And so to get to election night and to start hearing more and more stories of voter suppression, to hear more and more from people who were told that they couldn't vote or who were turned away or had to give up because of 4-hour lines, that broke my heart.
Republican Brian Kemp holds a narrow lead over Democrat Stacey Abrams.
Tens of thousands of ballots left to be counted in this election. They were counting provisional ballots for hours.
Provisional ballots are basically placebos. They're being given to voters to kind of shut them up, make them go away.
The next day, I was so excited because they were saying that it was a close race. I was like, oh, let me make sure that my vote count. So I called there, the number that was on the paper that I got from the voting poll. And she go, oh no, they counting every vote. You don't need to call. I called my mom to double check. My mom worked for the poll for 20-some years. And she said, no, that's not true. You call back to make sure the vote count. And someone else says to the phone, and I got the same thing. No, you don't need to call back. We counting all the votes.
We just started discovering so many people voting provisionally. We realized, oh, you voted provisionally, so you might have to come back here the next day and show your ID. Is that something you know? And they're like, no, I already voted. Like, I'm good.
But you have to come back within 3 days with the documentation to prove you are who you say you are. When you have a large working class population that has to punch a clock, that's really tough. You've lost pay from work trying to vote. That's a poll tax.
I wanted to confirm if my vote was counted or not.
All right, what is your last name?
Kimball.
Let's see, there was no participation.
So does that...
You weren't given credit for voting.
My vote was not counted.
It looks like it on election day, yes, ma'am.
No, I thank you. Goodbye.
Last night, my opponent ended her campaign. The election is over, and I'm honored to be Georgia's governor-elect.
I acknowledge that former Secretary of State Brian Kemp will be certified as the victor in the 2018 gubernatorial election. But to watch an elected official baldly pin his hopes for election on the suppression of the people's democratic right to vote has been appalling. This is not a speech of concession. Because concession means to acknowledge an action is right, true, or proper. As a woman of conscience and faith, I cannot concede that.
I don't want everybody to vote. Elections are not won by a majority of people. They never have been from the beginning of our country, and they are not now. As a matter of fact, our leverage in the elections, quite candidly, goes up as the voting populace goes down.
Georgia 2018 was a case study of voter suppression. And as we approach the 2020 elections, we're seeing a coordinated effort to suppress, from lawyers, millions of dollars, and potentially the biggest tool of all, the coronavirus.
The coronavirus pandemic is creating concerns ahead of the 2020 election. With no official end in sight to the crisis, there are questions about whether voters will be able to head to the polls to cast their ballot in November.
Out of a large city of Milwaukee, we almost got 600,000 people in the city limits. They only have 5 polling sites open during a pandemic.
In Wisconsin today, thousands waiting for hours, forced to choose between protecting their own health and exercising their right to vote.
This is so wrong. This is just so wrong. Stop playing politics with our lives. The 2020 primary in Georgia was like the 2018 election all over again.
This is primary day in Georgia. Lines in Atlanta stretching for blocks.
There were people and seniors who had been sitting out waiting to vote for more than 5 hours.
This is wrong! This is America!
I think that mail-in voting is a terrible thing.
If you ever agreed to it, you'd never have a Republican elected in this country again.
Oh, beautiful. We are not going to let them take from us what our grandparents and parents fought and suffered and died to give us in the first place.
We
We are here to resist an ID law that is undemocratic, unconstitutional, and immoral.
People are demanding democracy. New Mexico now has same-day voter registration. Iowa, Colorado, Nevada, Florida, and Arizona all passed laws restoring voting rights to those formerly incarcerated. Maine has enacted automatic voter registration. Delaware and Virginia enacted early in-person voting. And in response to the coronavirus pandemic, Michigan, Illinois, New Hampshire, and California have all committed to expanding mail-in and absentee voting in the 2020 election.
We belong together. We are all part of the fabric of this country, and we understand what's at stake.
Any voter suppression law is not just about black people, it is about America itself.
On my mother's dying bed at 92 years old, former sharecropper, her last words were, "Do not let them take our votes away from us."
No one should have to risk their life to vote. And for the politicians that put you in front of a coronavirus firing squad, vote them out.
From sea to shining sea.
Thank you all for watching the film and, most importantly, taking action. Whether you're seeing this through Indivisible, Move On, Stand Up America, Brady, Black Voters Matter, Greenpeace, or now this, we hope that each and every one of the thousands of you and thousands who are watching this will do, as Senator Booker said, be ignited to take action. The film is free, so there's no way that people will be punished if they're not able to afford it. And most importantly, we count on each and every one of you. One of the things we do at Brave New Films, we put a face on policy. And with that, I would like to introduce one of the people you've seen in the film, Kiara Jackson, who is going to talk about her experience with voter suppression. Thank you. Kiara? Muted.
Oh, I apologize. Thank you, Mr. Greenwald, for having me and allowing me to be a part of this film that is definitely touching thousands across the nation. I'm also honored to be a part of this panel with such a prestigious group of legislators. So once again, thank you for extending this opportunity to me. That day, what I basically want to get across is that it was very disheartening knowing that I'm a part of an organization that prioritizes making sure our youth are civically engaged. And to give a bit of an introduction, I'm sorry. My name is Kiara Jackson. I currently serve as the Albany branch president of the NAACP, formerly the Albany State University chapter president, which is where I was doing a lot of my civic engagement in reaching our student population, making sure we were getting out to the vote on campus. So when election day rolled around, and I'm pumping everybody up with my student body, making sure that everybody's aware of their polling locations, they know what the ballots are going to look like, they know how to vote, of course, in their own perspective interests, and that everybody's just ready to just complete their civic duty and go on about their days. To arrive at that day and be faced with so many difficulties and problems that we couldn't have predicted was just disheartening. One of the ones that I touched on briefly in the documentary was the fact that I was registered in Albany, Dougherty County, the previous election, 2016 presidential election. And so Albany, Dougherty County had been the only place that I'd been registered to vote. So come election day, to my surprise, when I was turned away and told that I was not able to vote because I was registered in my hometown an hour and a half away, an overwhelming wave of just confusion just rose over me, because I was also being told that a lot of my student body were being told the same things. They had been registered, and so these were things that we made sure to cover while we were registering our student body to vote, because oftentimes people don't realize that in order to vote on campus, they have to be registered at their school address, since that will be the address that they will be at come election time. So knowing that, you know, in our efforts to help register people to vote and get them prepared for this day, that the very thing that we made sure to be corrected on their registrations was the main thing that people were being turned around for, and it was just confusing. So luckily for me, I am a part of an organization that does have resources and informs its members of the resources that they have when we are faced with issues like this. So I was able to call somebody from the voter protection hotline and get more information about how I could actually cast my vote. Because at this point, I'm determined. I'm not taking no for an answer, and I'm trying to get my student body involved and let them know that even though they might have been turned around, and even though they believe or have been told that their vote may not count, or they won't be able to cast their vote, that there's always a way to double check and make sure that you have access to the ballot that you have the right to cast. So after being told that, my mission was to make sure that I could cast mine and get my student body in touch with the resources so that they can also cast their vote. So from then on, my mission was making sure that my registration was up to date in the system, because I know that it had been, and I'd registered under my school address. So making sure I had crossed all of my T's, dotted my I's, and then making sure that our voter protection hotline was able to get in contact with our elections office and confirm this information so that I could, once again, cast my vote. So once that information was discovered and I was directed to a new polling location, it seemed as if I just was not going to be able to vote. I was getting told the same thing, that I was registered back in my hometown and that I had to drive an hour and a half away on a day that I had to be at work within the next 30 minutes to go and cast my vote. So once again, just being determined and persistent with the issue, knowing that I'd been registered in Dougherty County, because once again, it's the only place that I'd been registered. I just continued to press the issue and ask questions and demand information so that, you know, if I walked away that day not being able to cast my vote, I knew that I would have done everything that I had done to be able to cast my vote. And honestly, that is what my mission is now as an activist within the NAACP, to continue to give my constituents the tools that they need to be civically engaged, and just keep everybody aware that voter suppression is very much still around. The tactics are only getting worse, but if we continue to work together collectively as a community, as community leaders, then this is something that we hope will dissipate and also be corrected legislatively in the future.
Thank you very much, Kiara. And I'm so pleased that you refused to take no for an answer. And, you know, there's a lot of talk about patriotism these days, but I must say what you and many of the folks in the film and many of the thousands of people watching the film today and taking action really are a definition of patriotism in the best sense. And with that, we have a couple of short videos from just a few of our many, many group partners. Those of you who are part of a group and are not participating yet, please sign up and someone from Brave New Films will be in touch with you. In the meantime, Renato, could you show the two videos, please?
Hi, I'm Sean Eldridge. I'm the founder and president of Stand Up America. We are a progressive advocacy community of more than 2 million Americans across the country working to strengthen our democracy in this critical moment. First of all, I want to thank Brave New Films for putting together this powerful documentary in a moment where we need it most. And my role today is to provide you with 2 meaningful actions you can take right now if you're fired up and want to fight back against voter suppression. The first thing we need you to do is to make a phone call. For over 80 days, Senate Republicans have been blocking critical funding that states need right now to expand vote by mail, early voting, and online registration so that every voter can safely participate. We need them to pass that legislation right now before it's too late. So please take 1 minute to make a call. You can text the word MAIL to 21333, the word MAIL to 21333. We'll provide you with talking points and we'll patch you right through to your senator. The second thing you can do is join us in reaching out to our fellow Americans to educate them on how to vote safely this year. We're going to be reaching out to millions of Americans, sending texts, making phone calls to ensure that folks vote absentee where they can, vote early in their community if they choose to, and to get registered if they're not registered already. And we need your help to do that. So you can sign up to become a volunteer or learn more by texting the word FIGHT to 21333. That's FIGHT to 21333. Thanks for being informed. Thanks for taking action.
Hey everybody, I'm Megan Hatcher-Mays. I'm the Director of Democracy Policy at Indivisible, and I'm sure you are as excited as I am for the premiere of Suppressed 2020, The Fight to Vote. Voter suppression is not a new thing, but we've seen in 2020 alone even more desperate, terrible attacks on people's right to vote in this country. Donald Trump is sending tweets about how you can't trust vote by mail, etc., etc. This documentary is an incredible resource that really dives deep into the details of this problem and how we can go about fixing those issues. That's why at Indivisible, we love this film. We are working so hard to make sure that people have access to their ballots, access to polling locations in 2020, which is right around the corner. So that's why we are urging our members to call their senators and tell them to pass the HEROES Act, not the Mitch McConnell version, but the version that passed the House, the HEROES Act, because that bill includes election funding, funding for the Postal Service, ways for people to actually vote, unlike the Senate proposal introduced by Mitch McConnell, which does none of those things. And that's why documentaries like this, films like this, Suppressed 2020, are so critical in this fight for a free and fair election this November. I'm super excited for this premiere, and I hope you enjoy.
And as every one of our panelists has said, and as the film says, now is the time for action. And we have a variety of ways you can be involved. You can go to the website. You've heard from some of the organizations. So it's time to either mask up or mail in. And I look forward to seeing all of you taking some action as we move forward. Thank you very much.